The blood-red sun hung low over Ventura, California, like a vengeful god, casting long shadows across the parched earth, where Eleanor Maynard's fate was being bartered away by her own father for nothing more than a dapple gray stallion and a bottle of fine Kentucky bourbon. It was 1875, and in this dusty crossroads town, desperation had currency all its own. Lucinda Moore stood frozen in disbelief, her chestnut hair whipping across her face in the hot western wind. The 17-year-old sister had just returned from fetching water to find her 20-year-old sister being handed over to Jasper Quinn, the meanest rancher in San Buenaventura County, a man whose age tripled Eleanor's own. "Pa, you can't do this," Lucinda cried, dropping her buckets and rushing toward her sister. Their father, Edmund Moore, a once proud man now broken by debt and drink, wouldn't meet her eyes. "Deal's done, Lucy. Quinn's cleared my debts and given me his prize horse. Eleanor will have a roof over her head and food in her belly more than I can promise either of you come winter." Eleanor stood pale and rigid beside Quinn's wagon, her simple calico dress billowing around her thin frame. Her green eyes, usually so full of life, had gone dull with shock. "It's all right, Lucy," she whispered, though they both knew it was anything but. "Look after Pa." "No." Lucinda grabbed her sister's hand. "I won't let you go." Quinn, a bull-necked man with yellowed teeth and breath that reeked of tobacco, laughed as he climbed down from his wagon. "You got yourself another daughter to trade more. This one's got more fire, might be worth an extra bottle." His calloused hand reached out to touch Lucinda's cheek. "Don't you touch her." The voice came from behind them, strong and clear. Benjamin Porter sat atop his chestnut gelding at the edge of the Moore property, his lean frame silhouetted against the setting sun. At 24, he was already one of the most respected cowboys in the county, known for his skill with horses and his unwavering sense of justice. He'd been sweet on Eleanor since they were children, though his meager cowhand's wages had never given him the courage to ask for her hand. "This ain't your business, Porter," Quinn snarled, his hand moving instinctively to the pistol at his hip. Ben dismounted in one fluid motion, his blue eyes never leaving Quinn's face. "Making it my business." He turned to Edmund Moore. "Mr. Moore, I understand you're in a difficult position, but surely there's another way." Edmund looked away, shame radiating from him like heat off the desert floor. "Quinn's the only one willing to clear my debts. Bank's taking the farm next week if I don't come up with $200. Ben's jaw tightened. "And that's what Eleanor's worth to you. $200. The horse alone is worth $150, Quinn interjected with a smirk. "The bourbon's from Louisville, finest there is." Ben's hands clenched into fists at his sides. "Eleanor," he said softly, "do you want to go with this man?" A single tear traced its way down her cheek as she shook her head. "Then you're not going." Ben stepped between her and Quinn, his stance wide and ready. "Mr. Moore, I'll find a way to get you your money, but Eleanor stays here tonight." Quinn's face darkened with fury. "You're meddling with a legal arrangement, Porter. The girl's father has agreed to the terms." "A person ain't property," Ben replied evenly. "Not in California, not anywhere in this country, not anymore." The standoff continued for several tense heartbeats before Quinn spat in the dirt. "You've got until sundown tomorrow, Porter. My offer stands until then. After that." He let the threat hang in the air as he climbed back onto his wagon and snapped the reins, sending his team lurching forward in a cloud of dust. As the wagon disappeared down the road, Eleanor's knees gave out. Ben caught her before she hit the ground, his strong arms gentle around her shoulders. "Thank you," she whispered, her face pressed against his chest. "But Ben, how will you get the money? That's more than you make in a year." Ben looked out over the rugged landscape, his mind racing. "I don't know yet," he admitted, But I'll find a way, Eleanor, I swear it. What Ben didn't say was that he'd give everything he owned: his horses, his saddle, the small plot of land he'd been saving for, even the gold pocket watch that had been his father's to keep Eleanor from becoming another man's property. In the fading light of that California evening, with the woman he loved trembling in his arms, Benjamin Porter made a silent vow that would change the course of both their lives forever. By dawn the next morning, Ben had devised a desperate plan. He rode hard to the neighboring ranch where he worked, arriving just as the foreman was heading out to check the herd. "Frank, I need an advance on my wages," Ben said without preamble. "All of it. Whatever you can spare." The older man squinted up at him. "That's a mighty unusual request, Porter." "You in some kind of trouble?" Ben briefly explained the situation with Eleanor and Quinn, watching as Frank's weathered face grew increasingly grim. "Quinn's a snake," Frank agreed. "Been trying to expand his holdings for years, but I can only give you $50 advance, son. Ranch ain't doing well enough for more." Ben thanked him and rode on to the next ranch and the next, cobbling together loans and advances from every friend and acquaintance he had. By midday, he had managed to scrape together $97, not even half of what he needed. In desperation, he rode into Ventura proper, a growing town that served as the county seat. The main street bustled with activity: merchants hawking wares, cowboys fresh off the trail spending their pay, and ladies in fine dresses navigating the wooden sidewalks to avoid the mud and horse manure below. Ben tied his horse outside the first bank of Ventura and straightened his worn vest before entering. The cool interior was a stark contrast to the dusty heat outside, and the bank manager, Horace Wilkinson, looked up from his ledger with surprise. "Mr. Porter, what brings you to town today?" Ben removed his hat and approached the polished counter. "I need a loan, Mr. Wilkinson. $200. The manager's eyebrows rose. "That's a considerable sum. What collateral do you have to offer?" "My land, the 10 acres on Sulphur Mountain." "The land you've been paying on for 3 years, Wilkinson frowned. "That's only half paid off, son. Not enough collateral for 200. I have a good horse, tack, and this." Ben placed his father's gold watch on the counter. "It's solid gold, made in San Francisco." Wilkinson examined the watch and shook his head. "I'm sorry, but it's still not enough." Ben's shoulders slumped, but as he turned to leave, a voice called from across the bank. "I might be able to help with that." Lillian Marquez stood by the teller's window, her dark hair elegantly arranged beneath a modest hat. At 22, she was the daughter of Don Carlos Marquez, one of the wealthiest landowners in the county, whose Spanish land grant predated American settlement. Ben had seen her occasionally at town gatherings but had never spoken to her directly. "Miss Marquez," Ben acknowledged with a respectful nod. "I couldn't help overhearing," she said, approaching them. "You're trying to save Eleanor Moore from Jasper Quinn, aren't you?" Surprised, Ben nodded. "Yes, madam. Quinn tried to force my father to sell him land last year by damming our creek. I have no love for the man." Her dark eyes flashed with determination. "How much do you have already?" $97, plus whatever Mr. Wilkinson might loan me against my property." Lillian turned to the banker. "Mr. Wilkinson, if I were to co-sign a note for Mr. Porter, would that be sufficient?" The banker blinked in surprise. "Well, yes, Miss Marquez, but your father, my father taught me to stand against injustice," she interrupted firmly. "And selling a young woman like chattel is as unjust as it comes." An hour later, Ben rode out of town with $200 safely tucked in his pocket, and a debt of gratitude to Lillian Marquez that he wasn't sure he could ever repay. The sun was already beginning its descent toward the western horizon when he reached the Moore farm. He found Eleanor sitting on the porch steps, her small valise packed beside her. Her face lit up with hope when she saw him, then fell as Quinn's wagon appeared on the road behind him. "You're just in time," she said quietly as he dismounted. "Pa's inside, getting the deed to show Quinn that the property's still legally his until next week." Ben took her hand. "I have the money, Eleanor. You don't have to go with him." The relief that flooded her face made all his desperate efforts worthwhile. "Oh, Ben," she whispered. "How did you manage it?" Before he could answer, Quinn's wagon pulled up and the rancher climbed down, his eyes narrowing when he spotted Ben. "Come to say goodbye to the girl, Porter." He sneered. "Come to pay her father's debt," Ben corrected, pulling out the money. $200 as agreed." Quinn's face darkened. "Moore and I had a different agreement, a horse and a bottle for my daughter." Edmund Moore stepped onto the porch, his voice stronger than it had been the day before. Shame had given way to resolve overnight. "I was drunk and desperate, Quinn. It wasn't right, and we both know it." "A deal's a deal," Quinn insisted, his hand hovering near his gun. Ben stepped forward, placing himself between Quinn and the Moores. "The deal was to clear Mr. Moore's debt. I'm offering to do the same with cash, unless you'd rather explain to the sheriff how you were trying to buy a woman in the state of California in 1875. For a tense moment, it seemed Quinn might draw his weapon. Then he spat in the dirt and climbed back onto his wagon. "You'll regret this, Porter. Both of you will." He snapped his reins and the wagon lurched away. Eleanor rushed to Ben's side. "You did it," she breathed. "But Ben, where did you get so much money?" Ben explained about the loans from his friends and the bank note co-signed by Lillian Marquez. "I've mortgaged everything I own," he admitted, "and I'll be working double shifts for a year to pay it all back." "You did that? For me?" Eleanor's voice was soft with wonder. Ben looked into her eyes. "I'd have given everything I had and everything I ever will have to keep you safe, Eleanor. I love you. I think I always have." She reached up to touch his face, her fingers trembling slightly. "Oh, Ben, I've loved you too. For so long." Their first kiss, there in the golden afternoon light with the scent of sage on the breeze, felt like coming home after a long journey. Neither noticed Edmund Moore slip back inside the house, giving them their moment of privacy. But their troubles were far from over. Jasper Quinn was not a man who forgave being crossed, and his threat would hang over them like a storm cloud in the months to come. The news of Ben's heroic rescue spread quickly through Ventura County, earning him admiration from most and caution from others who knew Quinn's vindictive nature. Ben returned to work with renewed determination, taking on extra shifts and even breaking horses for neighboring ranches to earn additional money. Eleanor, meanwhile, found work as a seamstress in town, determined to help her father save the farm and repay Ben for his sacrifice. Her skilled hands were soon in demand, and she began to build a modest but steady income that helped keep food on the table. 2 weeks after Quinn's failed attempt to claim Eleanor, Ben rode to the Moore farm for Sunday dinner, as had become his custom. The small house was filled with the aroma of fresh bread and stew made from vegetables Eleanor had grown in their kitchen garden. "You're looking well, Mr. Moore," Ben observed as they sat down to eat. It was true Edmund had been sober since the incident, and color had returned to his face. "Feel better than I have in years," Edmund admitted. "Nothing like almost selling your daughter to make a man take stock of his life." His face clouded with shame. "I still don't know how you girls can stand to look at me." "You're our pa," Lucinda said simply. "We love you." Eleanor reached across the table to squeeze her father's hand. "And we're rebuilding together. That's what matters now." After dinner, Ben asked Eleanor to walk with him in the fading light. They strolled toward a large oak tree at the edge of the property, their fingers intertwined. "I've been thinking," Ben said as they reached the tree, "about the future. Eleanor looked up at him, her green eyes reflecting the last of the day's light. "What about it? I want you in mine, Eleanor, every day of it." He took both her hands in his. "I know I'm not a wealthy man. Everything I own is mortgaged to the hilt right now. But I love you, and if you'll have me, I promise to spend my life making you happy." Tears welled in Eleanor's eyes. "Are you asking me to marry you, Benjamin Porter?" He nodded, suddenly unable to speak around the lump in his throat. "Yes," she whispered, throwing her arms around his neck. "Yes, I'll marry you." Their joy was complete in that moment, untroubled by thoughts of Quinn or debts or the uncertain future. They were young and in love, and in that instant it seemed nothing could stand against them. But Jasper Quinn had been nursing his humiliation and plotting his revenge. The very next day, as Ben was working with a spirited young stallion at the Ramirez ranch, a rider approached at a gallop. "Fire!" the man shouted. "There's a fire at the Moore place." Ben's blood ran cold. He vaulted onto his horse without a saddle and raced toward the Moore farm, praying he wasn't too late. As he crested the hill above the property, his worst fears were confirmed. The barn was engulfed in flames, and the fire was spreading toward the house. He spotted Eleanor and Lucinda forming a bucket brigade from the well, while Edmund frantically tried to lead their 2 milk cows away from the blaze. Ben joined them without a word, taking the heaviest buckets and throwing water on the edge of the fire closest to the house. Other neighbors began to arrive, and together they managed to save the house, though the barn was a complete loss. As the last embers died down, Ben found Eleanor sitting on the porch steps, her face streaked with soot and tears. "The animals?" he asked quietly, sitting beside her. "We got the cows out, and the chickens flew off." Her voice was hollow. "But all our feed, Pa's tools, the wagon, everything's gone." Ben put his arm around her shoulders. "We'll rebuild." "It was Quinn, wasn't it?" She looked at him, her eyes hard. "He did this." Ben couldn't lie to her. "Probably, but we can't prove it." "What's he going to do next, Ben? Burn the house? Hurt Lucinda or Pa?" Her voice trembled. "Hurt you." He pulled her close, wishing he could promise her safety but knowing better than to make promises he couldn't keep. "We'll figure it out, Eleanor, together." The next morning, Ben rode into Ventura to speak with Sheriff Thomas Davis. The lawman listened to Ben's suspicions about Quinn and the fire but shook his head regretfully. "I understand your concerns, Porter, but I can't arrest a man on suspicion alone. No one saw Quinn or his men near the Moore place yesterday." "So we wait until he does worse?" Ben asked, frustration evident in his voice. The sheriff sighed. "Bring me evidence and I'll act on it. That's the best I can offer." Discouraged, Ben was leaving the sheriff's office when he nearly collided with Lillian Marquez. "Mr. Porter," she said with a smile, "I heard about the fire at the Moore farm. Is everyone all right?" "Yes, madam, though they lost their barn and everything in it." He removed his hat. "I never properly thanked you for your help with the bank loan. You saved Eleanor from a terrible fate. I'm glad I could help." She glanced around and lowered her voice. "Is it true what they're saying? That Quinn was behind the fire?" Ben nodded grimly. "I believe so, but there's no proof." Lillian's dark eyes flashed with anger. "That man has terrorized this county long enough. My father is hosting a gathering this Saturday. The most influential ranchers and businessmen in the county will be there. Come and bring Eleanor. Perhaps together we can find a solution to the Quinn problem." Ben hesitated. "Miss Marquez, I appreciate the invitation, but Eleanor and I were simple folk. We'd be out of place at such a gathering." "Nonsense," Lillian insisted. "Quinn respects only 2 things, money and power. If we're to stop him, we need both on our side." She touched his arm lightly. "Please come, for Eleanor's safety." Put that way, Ben couldn't refuse. He agreed to attend and rode back to tell Eleanor about the invitation. To his surprise, she was more enthusiastic than he'd expected. the Marquez hacienda. "I've always wondered what it looks like inside," she said, her eyes lighting up for the first time since the fire. Then her face fell. "But I have nothing suitable to wear to such an event." "I could help with that," Lucinda offered. She'd been listening from the kitchen doorway. "We could alter Mother's blue silk. It's been in the trunk since she died, and you're about her size now." For the next few days, the Moore sisters worked feverishly on the dress, transforming the outdated gown into something that, while simple, would not look out of place among the finery of Ventura's elite. Ben, meanwhile, had his only good shirt washed and pressed and borrowed a decent jacket from Frank, his foreman. Saturday evening arrived clear and mild. Ben drove the borrowed wagon to the Moore farm, his heart catching in his throat when Eleanor stepped out onto the porch. The blue silk dress complemented her fair skin and brought out the color of her eyes, while Lucinda had arranged her honey blonde hair in an elegant twist. "You look beautiful," Ben said simply, helping her into the wagon. The Marquez hacienda was the grandest home in the county, built in the Spanish style with whitewashed walls and red tile roof. Lanterns illuminated the courtyard where well-dressed guests mingled, sipping wine and conversing in both English and Spanish. Ben felt out of place the moment they arrived, acutely aware of his borrowed jacket and rough hands. Eleanor sensed his discomfort and squeezed his arm reassuringly. "We belong here as much as anyone," she whispered. "Remember why we came." Lillian spotted them and glided over, resplendent in a burgundy gown that spoke of San Francisco or even European origins. "Mr. Porter, Miss Moore, I'm so glad you could come." She kissed Eleanor's cheek. "What a lovely dress. That shade of blue is perfect with your coloring." She introduced them to her father, Don Carlos, a dignified man with silver at his temples who welcomed them warmly to his home. As the evening progressed, Ben noticed that Lillian was purposefully introducing them to specific guests: the mayor of Ventura, the president of the bank, several prominent ranchers, and a distinguished-looking man she introduced as Judge William Hammond. "The judge has been hearing some troubling stories about Jasper Quinn," Lillian explained once they had a moment alone. "Stories that go beyond your experience with him." Judge Hammond nodded gravely. "Quinn has been acquiring land through questionable means for years. Threats, intimidation, even violence, but witnesses are reluctant to come forward. Because they're afraid," Eleanor said quietly. "Like we are." "Exactly," the judge agreed. "But if enough people stand together." Ben understood then what Lillian was attempting to orchestrate: a coalition against Quinn, powerful enough that he couldn't intimidate or threaten them all. "What would you need from us?" he asked. "Your story, officially documented," the judge replied. "And your willingness to testify if it comes to that." Ben looked at Eleanor. "It could be dangerous." She met his gaze steadily. "We're already in danger. At least this way we're not facing him alone." By the end of the evening, a plan had been set in motion. Judge Hammond would begin quietly collecting sworn statements from Quinn's victims. Don Carlos Marquez would use his considerable influence to ensure the territorial governor was aware of the situation. And the sheriff, who had arrived later in the evening, reluctantly agreed to increase patrols near the Moore property. As Ben helped Eleanor into the wagon for the ride home, he felt a curious mixture of hope and dread. They had powerful allies now, but they had also openly challenged Quinn in a way that could not be ignored. "Do you think it will work?" Eleanor asked as they drove away from the hacienda, the sounds of the gathering fading behind them. "I don't know," Ben admitted. "But it's better than waiting for Quinn to strike again." They rode in silence for several minutes before Eleanor spoke again. "If we survive this, when we survive this," she corrected herself, "I want to set a date for our wedding. I don't want to wait any longer than we have to." Ben smiled in the darkness. "How about October? That gives us time to rebuild the barn and get in the harvest." "October," she agreed, resting her head on his shoulder. "Just 2 months away." They were so lost in thoughts of their future together that neither noticed the rider watching them from the shadow of a large oak as they passed. But the rider saw them, noted their closeness, and turned his horse back toward Quinn's ranch to report what he'd observed. The next week passed quietly. Too quietly, Ben thought as he rode to the Moore farm on Saturday evening. The absence of any retaliation from Quinn made him increasingly uneasy. He found Edmund and Lucinda in the kitchen, but no sign of Eleanor. "She walked to the Thompson place to deliver some mending," Lucinda explained. "Should have been back by now, though." A cold knot formed in Ben's stomach. "How long ago did she leave?" 3, maybe 4 hours ago, Edmund said, looking concerned. "It's not like her to be late." Ben was already heading for the door. "I'll find her. Stay here in case she comes back." He rode first to the Thompson farm, where Mrs. Thompson confirmed that Eleanor had delivered the mending but had left at least 2 hours earlier. Increasingly frantic, Ben retraced the path Eleanor would have taken, scanning the ground for any sign of disturbance. About halfway between the two farms, he found a scrap of blue fabric caught on a thorny bush, and hoofprints showing where several horses had recently left the trail. His heart pounding, Ben followed the tracks into a wooded area, moving as quietly as possible. He heard them before he saw them, men's voices, rough with laughter, and a woman's voice, tight with fear. Ben dismounted and crept closer, staying hidden in the underbrush. In a small clearing, Eleanor stood with her back against a tree, surrounded by 3 men Ben recognized as Quinn's ranch hands. Her dress was torn at the shoulder, the source of the blue fabric he'd found, and her hair had fallen from its pins, but she appeared otherwise unharmed. "Quinn wants to talk to you, pretty lady," one of the men was saying. "About that fiancé of yours and his big ideas. If Mr. Quinn wants to speak with me, he can call at my home like a gentleman," Eleanor replied, her voice remarkably steady despite her obvious fear. The man laughed. "Quinn ain't feeling particularly gentlemanly toward you or Porter these days." Ben assessed the situation quickly. 3 armed men against his single pistol made for poor odds, but he couldn't leave Eleanor in their hands. He was about to step into the clearing when the sound of approaching horses made him hesitate. 2 riders appeared on the far side of the clearing. One was Jasper Quinn himself. The other, to Ben's shock, was Sheriff Davis. "What the hell is going on here?" the sheriff demanded, taking in the scene. Quinn appeared equally surprised. "I might ask you the same question, Davis. What are you doing following me?" "Got word you and your boys were planning something foolish," the sheriff replied. "Looks like my information was good." One of Quinn's men moved his hand toward his gun, but the sheriff was faster, his revolver clearing its holster in one smooth motion. "Don't," he warned, Quinn's face contorted with fury. "This ain't your concern, Davis. The girl's father sold her to me fair and square." "That's not how the law works, Quinn, and you know it." The sheriff dismounted, keeping his gun trained on the men. "Miss Moore, are you all right?" Eleanor nodded, still pressed against the tree. "Good. You come on over here and get behind me." She began to move cautiously around the edge of the clearing. As she passed the spot where Ben was hidden, he whispered her name. She started, then saw him crouched in the underbrush. "Keep going," he murmured. "I'll cover you." Eleanor continued toward the sheriff while Ben slipped around to approach from another angle, his gun now drawn. "You're outnumbered, Davis," Quinn snarled, unaware of Ben's presence. "1 sheriff against 3 of my men. Bad odds." "Make that 2 against 3, Ben said, stepping into the clearing with his pistol aimed at Quinn. And I like those odds just fine. Quinn's face darkened with hatred. Porter, should have known you'd be sniffing around. Step away from your weapons, the sheriff ordered Quinn's men. All of you. For a tense moment, it seemed the confrontation would end in bloodshed. Then Quinn slowly raised his hands. Do as he says, boys, he said, though his eyes promised retribution. For now, the men complied and the sheriff collected their guns. Miss Moore, can you ride? When Eleanor nodded, he continued, Take my horse and ride to town. Tell Deputy Wilson to get out here with a wagon for these men. I'll go with her, Ben said, not willing to let Eleanor out of his sight again. The sheriff shook his head. Need you here, Porter? 4 of them, 1 of me, those odds aren't so good. Ben looked torn, but Eleanor touched his arm. I'll be all right, Ben. The road to town is clear and I can ride fast. Reluctantly, Ben helped her onto the sheriff's horse. Be careful, he urged. She leaned down to kiss him quickly. You too. As Eleanor galloped away, Quinn laughed coldly. Touching. Enjoy it while it lasts, Porter. This ain't over, not by a long shot. Actually, Quinn, I think it is, the sheriff said. Got quite a file building against you at the judge's office. Intimidation, arson, now attempted kidnapping. You're looking at some serious prison time. Quinn's confidence faltered slightly. You can't prove anything. Don't need to prove the other matters yet, Davis replied. Caught you red-handed with this one. And once you're behind bars, I suspect folks will start finding their courage to speak up about the rest. The arrival of the deputy with the wagon an hour later marked the beginning of the end for Jasper Quinn's reign of terror in Ventura County. He and his men were taken to the town jail, and in the days that followed, witnesses indeed began to come forward with tales of Quinn's misdeeds over the years. Judge Hammond presided over the preliminary hearing, where Quinn was bound over for trial on multiple charges. The judge set bail at an amount so high that even Quinn couldn't manage it, ensuring he would remain in jail until his trial. For the first time in months, Ben and Eleanor could breathe freely. With Quinn behind bars and his men either jailed or fled from the county, the immediate threat had passed. They threw themselves into rebuilding the Moore farm, with Ben spending every spare moment helping to construct a new barn. Their wedding plans proceeded, with October 15th set as the date. Eleanor continued her seamstress work, saving every penny toward their future, while Ben took on additional responsibilities at the ranch, earning the foreman's trust and a small raise. 2 weeks before the wedding, Ben was surprised to receive a letter from Lillian Marquez, inviting him to the hacienda on a matter of business. Curious, he rode out the following day and was shown into Don Carlos's study, where both Lillian and her father awaited him. Mr. Porter, Don Carlos greeted him warmly. Thank you for coming. My daughter tells me you were instrumental in bringing Quinn to justice. Ben shook his head modestly. I just did what anyone would do to protect someone they love. Perhaps, but not everyone would have succeeded. The older man gestured to a chair. Please sit. We have a proposition for you. Don Carlos explained that he was getting older and finding it difficult to manage all aspects of his vast holdings. I need a ranch manager, he said. Someone honest, hardworking, and knowledgeable about cattle. My daughter speaks very highly of you. Ben was stunned. It's a generous offer, sir, but I already have commitments to Frank Ramirez. I've spoken with Frank, Lillian interjected. He understands this is an opportunity you shouldn't refuse. The position includes use of the foreman's house on the north section of the property. A house, Ben repeated, thinking of Eleanor and the future he wanted to give her. Don Carlos nodded. 3 rooms, solid construction. Nothing fancy but comfortable for a young couple starting out. He named a salary that was double what Ben currently earned. It was a life-changing opportunity, and Ben knew it. May I have a day to discuss it with my fiancé? Of course, Don Carlos agreed. Take until the end of the week if you need to. That evening, Ben rode to the Moore farm with his mind racing. When he told Eleanor about the offer, her eyes widened. Ben, that's wonderful. The Marquez Ranch is one of the finest in California. You wouldn't mind living so far from your father and sister? He asked. She laughed. It's less than an hour's ride, Ben. We could visit every Sunday. Her expression grew more serious. This is the opportunity we've been praying for, a fresh start, away from all the bad memories of the past few months. Ben pulled her close. Then I'll tell Don Carlos yes. The days leading up to their wedding passed in a whirlwind of preparation and anticipation. Ben moved his few possessions to the foreman's house and began learning the operations of the Marquez Ranch. Eleanor finished her wedding dress, a simple but elegant creation of ivory satin, with lace she'd saved for months to purchase. October 15th dawned clear and bright, with just enough crispness in the air to hint at the coming winter. The small church in Ventura was filled with well-wishers, the Moores, Ben's colleagues from both ranches, Lillian and her father, and many townspeople who had heard the dramatic story of their courtship. As Eleanor walked down the aisle on her father's arm, Ben felt his heart might burst with love and pride. She had never looked more beautiful, her face radiant with happiness beneath a veil borrowed from Lucinda. Their vows were simple and heartfelt, promising to love and cherish each other through whatever life might bring. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Ben kissed his bride with all the pent-up emotion of their difficult journey to this moment. The celebration afterward was held in the town square, with tables laden with food contributed by everyone in attendance. Don Carlos had provided wine from his own vineyards, and music filled the air as the sun began to set. Ben and Eleanor moved among their guests, accepting congratulations and well wishes. When they reached Lillian Marquez, she embraced Eleanor warmly. "I'm so happy for you both," she said sincerely, "and I wanted to give you this." She pressed a small envelope into Eleanor's hand. A wedding gift. Inside was a document that it took Eleanor a moment to understand. When she did, she gasped. "Lillian, we can't possibly accept this." Ben looked over her shoulder and felt his own surprise. It was the deed to his 10 acres on Sulphur Mountain, marked paid in full. "Please," Lillian insisted. "My father and I want you to have a secure future. The land is your nest egg, something no one can take from you." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears as she hugged Lillian again. "Thank you for everything." As the evening wound down, Ben and Eleanor prepared to leave for their new home. Lucinda helped her sister change into a traveling dress, while Ben hitched the horse to the wagon he'd decorated with flowers for the occasion. Edmund Moore approached Ben as he worked, somewhat awkward in his Sunday best. "I want to thank you, son," he said gruffly. "Not just for saving Eleanor from Quinn, but for loving her the way you do." Ben straightened and extended his hand to his new father-in-law. "She's easy to love, sir, and I promise to take care of her always." Edmund nodded, emotion making it difficult for him to speak. "I know you will." The newlyweds departed amid a shower of rice and good wishes, Eleanor sitting close to Ben on the wagon seat as they drove toward their new home in the gathering dusk. "Happy, Mrs. Porter?" Ben asked, savoring the sound of her new name. Eleanor leaned her head on his shoulder, echoing the position they'd been in months ago when discussing their wedding date, but with none of the fear that had shadowed them then. "Happier than I ever dreamed possible," she replied. "Quinn thought he was buying me with a horse and a bottle, but you traded everything you had to save me. I'll spend the rest of my life making sure that was a good bargain for you." Ben laughed and pulled her closer. "Sweetheart, it was the best trade I ever made, and I'd do it again in a heartbeat." Their home, though small, was waiting for them, clean and cozy with a fire already laid in the hearth. Ben carried Eleanor across the threshold, both of them laughing as he nearly bumped her head on the doorframe. "Welcome home, Mrs. Porter," he said, setting her gently on her feet. Eleanor looked around at the simple furnishings, the polished wood floors, the windows that would let in the morning sun. "Our home," she whispered. "It's perfect." Later, as they lay in each other's arms in their marriage bed, Eleanor traced the line of Ben's jaw with gentle fingers. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Quinn hadn't tried to buy me that day, if you hadn't been riding by just then?" Ben caught her hand and pressed a kiss to her palm. "I think we would have found our way to each other eventually. Some things are just meant to be." She smiled in the darkness. "Like us." "Exactly like us," he agreed, pulling her close again. "Now and always." Over the years that followed, the legend of Benjamin Porter the cowboy who traded everything to save his love from a villain became part of Ventura County folklore. Their story was told and retold, growing perhaps a bit more dramatic with each telling, but the heart of it remained true. Ben excelled in his position at the Marquez Ranch, eventually becoming Don Carlos's right-hand man and a respected figure throughout the county. Eleanor's seamstress business flourished, and she became known for creating the finest wedding dresses in Southern California. They were blessed with 3 children, 2 sons and a daughter who grew up hearing the story of how their father had risked everything for love, and how their mother had been brave enough to stand against a powerful man who thought he could buy and sell people like cattle. Quinn served 7 years in San Quentin prison for his crimes. Upon his release, he left California, reportedly heading to Arizona territory where his reputation hadn't preceded him. He never returned to Ventura. The little house on the Marquez Ranch expanded over the years as their family grew, but Ben and Eleanor never sold the 10 acres on Sulphur Mountain. It remained their nest egg, their security, and a reminder of the friends who had stood with them in their darkest hour. In 1895, 20 years after Ben had first intervened to save Eleanor from a fate worse than death, they hosted a celebration at their home. Edmund Moore, now in his 70s but still spry, danced with his grown granddaughter. Lucinda, married to the bank manager's son, brought her own children to play with their cousins. And Lillian Marquez, who had never married but had inherited her father's estate and managed it with impressive skill, raised a glass to toast her friends. "To Ben and Eleanor," she said, her dark eyes warm with affection, "who showed us all what true love really means." As the afternoon sun bathed the gathering in golden light, Ben took Eleanor's hand and led her away from the crowd, to the shade of an old oak tree similar to the one where he'd proposed 2 decades earlier. "Happy?" he asked, just as he had on their wedding night. Eleanor, her beauty matured but undiminished by the years, smiled up at the man who had traded everything he owned to save her, and who had spent every day since proving that she was worth far more than any worldly possession. "More than words can say," she replied, standing on tiptoe to kiss him. "Every single day with you has been the greatest blessing of my life." Ben wrapped his arms around her, marveling at how perfectly they still fit together after all these years. "Mine too, Eleanor, mine too." And there, beneath the oak tree, with the sounds of their loved one's laughter floating on the breeze, they sealed their enduring love with a kiss as sweet and true as their first had been, a testament to the truth that some trades, made from the heart, yield returns beyond measure for a lifetime and beyond.